we needed to provide a bit of context in terms of the history of this place, that we call Canada.
Yeah.
Um, we still deal with, that kind of racism almost on a daily basis.
I'm looking forward to this. Because Angela's Shadow is a beautiful, beautiful, challenging, and wonderful film.
Oh,
Uh,
thank you. That's sweet.
it really is. It really is something. I'm speaking, of course, with director and co-writer Jules Koostachin about Angela's Shadow. And Jules, thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me. Happy to be here.
As I was saying, Angela's Shadow is a beautiful film. Where did it come from?
Um, I was writing a book that never got published, and my mentor at the time was the late Lee Miracle.
Mm.
And at that time, I really wanted to kind of understand or delve into residential school, intergenerational trauma, healing, everything else. So I wrote the first draft. So that's where it was inspired by. And then I made the film Broken Angel, which is the first of the trilogy. Um, and then the second one, Angela Shadow, based on the novel never published. I talked to a friend of mine and I said, "Do you want to co-write this with me? Let's get this thing done and let's relate it somehow to Broken Angel." And we did. And I feel like it's also a tribute to Indigenous women and their strength and resiliency and why we still know our culture, why we're still here, and yeah, just inspired by who we are as Indigenous folks, and that strength.
It really is. It really is wonderful. Angela is just a wonderful character on this incredible journey.
Yes.
Um, and I wondered if you could talk about that, as not only just Indigenous women, but the idea for her journey towards reclaiming her identity, and speak to the power of owning her heritage.
Yeah, she is a very complex character, and I'm so grateful that Sarah Leese agreed to play that because she's amazing on the screen. Um, with Angela, I wanted to provide context into why we're dealing with some of the things that we're dealing with today. So, for her to reclaim her culture means to overcome a lot of that internalized racism,
Mm.
internalized colonialism. She was raised in Ottawa. She goes back up north. I think it also speaks to the fact that there was something within her that wasn't answered. So she was led by that spirit in a way, and going home. And then when she went home, there was a lot of challenges she was met with that she had to overcome. Her husband being one of them.
I
um,
want to talk about Henry when we get.
right. Uh, yeah, I just feel like it was just such a personal story because here's this woman who has to overcome all this stuff that she's believed Indigenous people to be, and then she realizes that she is actually an Indigenous woman herself. And then there's a lot of acceptance and reflection, and um, there's relationships, there's people that she loves, so there's a lot of things that are going on for that character for sure. Um, and also being pregnant, bringing a new child into the world and being haunted by a spirit who she's kind of unaware about, like, unaware of. I feel like all of that comes into play when we think about the character of Angela and how complex her story is. Um, but I don't think, I think it kind of happens organically with the actor as well, with Sarah Leese. She's had the script for a while. We've been talking about it, and she had the script before we went to production, and we had a lot of conversation about where we wanted to go with her. And Sarah Lease being Indigenous herself, I feel like she came to the character with a lot of her own kind of work,
Mm.
and so did I. Yeah, so she's just a badass, Angela the badass.
She is. She
I
is.
don't know what else to say. Like, she's really quick and courageous. So yeah.
Well, this is first of all, this is a perfect film for Truth and Reconciliation Day. It is just on the money, perfect.
Right.
Um, and you mentioned about internal colonialization. That's a
Yeah,
mouthful.
yeah, it is. Or internalized. like today. These are big jargon words.
But in all seriousness, and so much of this is seen through Henry. She comes with Henry, and Henry at first seems fairly genuine. Like he seems like he's really trying, and of course things go places with him as the film progresses, and it gets progressively darker. Um, I was wondering in your mind, can we like what is Henry's biggest issue? What I know obviously he represents colonialization, but what is the biggest problem with Henry?
We've always been taught, or I've always been taught, that if you're going to engage with ceremony, then you better believe in the ceremony itself and the spirit realm. And I think when he goes to the sweat, he's not fully there or present. And it's almost like he sees it as a joke, and Mary, um, the supporting character there, she wants him to experience what they're experiencing in terms of the spirit realm. And she's the one who initiates it with the boys, and he's willing because he wants to learn. And I think he loves his wife wholeheartedly. He loves his wife. But then he's also faced with the fact that, oh, my wife is indigenous. What does that mean for my future child? Like all these things come into play, right? And it is a statement, or he's a statement about white supremacy and colonialization, like what happens in our communities when people go in and think that we're less than, or
Yeah.
come in and, you know, overpower our stories with their own, or religion and everything else. So I feel like he's all of that. I know it sounds really complex, but, he's definitely a statement. When you come into our ceremonies, when you come into our communities and you come in thinking that you're better than we are, we actually are pretty resilient and tough people, and we have our ways. I think he finds refuge in the priest, as but even the priest has his own demons that he's dealing with too. Like every character has an arc, right? And he's engaging with every single one of them, even his own wife, who's going through her own kind of journey and path, or on her own path. We wrote him in because we needed to provide a bit of context in terms of the history of this place, that we call Canada.
Yeah.
Um, we still deal with, that kind of racism almost on a daily basis. We still have people coming into our communities, researching, extracting, not following protocol. Um, so it's basically, when we think about Angela's shadow and Henry and their relationship, is that there's better ways to engage with people that you don't understand. Let them take the lead. They're the experts in their own lives, So I don't know, it was just kind of a strategy to kind of get conversation going, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting because at the beginning, he's being very nice, but it's almost like this is quaint.
Yes, yes.
Oh, this is lovely. How can I do this here? What can I say? What language, how do I speak? What was the line? Oh, when he's speaking to the gentleman who's Cree.
Oh,
That was great. I laughed. It's very funny.
well, there's a lot of comedy in there too, because I think, that lightens the story a little bit with the cousins. Like those are my two older boys, Savak and Mohegan, and my mom's in the film and my other son's in the film. So it was very much a family affair. Um, but yeah, there was a lot of comedy. There was a lot of kind of real life experiences that we brought onto the screen, through production. And yeah, it was just also showing that we are in a position of power and authority as well, if that makes sense, in terms of how things are happening or done around us. Yeah.
Absolutely, which is part of the main issue, I think, in so many ways. Like you said, even the pastor or the priest character, he's dealing with his own trauma, but there is this intent, like the scene where they're in the church and they're, sort of forcing communion is just it's so hard to watch.
Yeah.
And we see the legacy of damage done by church in the history and the tension in this film. And I wondered if maybe you could speak a little bit about the power of sharing the story and reclaiming that power that comes with it.
For me as a storyteller, I always have an indigenous audience in mind, first and foremost. That's who I make my films for, and then I invite everybody else in. So I don't want to spend my time like educating or, providing a history. But what I do provide is like an indigenous or a Cree lens
Mm,
of how I understand the story to be. And with Angela's Shadow, I feel like I was successful in that because I have all this lived experience. I have all these aunties, I have all these people that do the work to ensure that we know who we are today. Um, I feel like with me as a storyteller, I have a responsibility and obligation to kind of do things the right way, and uplift Indigenous story.
yeah.
And especially with the female characters in the film, I feel like it's through them that I can show our resiliency. I also think like having the women drummers kind of go underground,
Mm,
still sustaining and doing that important spiritual work and putting those children to rest. Like there's so many layers in this story, right? And for me as a Cree person who comes from Northern Ontario, I have access to that. And it's coming in, through me and my practice. Um, yeah, and I totally forgot your story. I am so sorry. I'm like so out to lunch today.
no, no problem. No problem.
I
Well, I was talking
thought
about that. Well, you did. I mean, you spoke about it. This idea of reclaiming
yes.
the power through story that has been taken and stolen through history, and we see that with they talk about the well, it's not the '60s scoop because this takes place before that, but this residential schools and all of that. Um, and in that spirit, actually, too, one of the lines I loved in this film is that we need to pass down the fight from generation to generation.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, in your mind, why is that such an important thing? Even with Angela being pregnant, this idea of the next generation that comes.
I actually wrote that in kind of last minute because I'm playing that role. And I was talking to my first AD and she's like, it has to be about your statement as a director and storyteller. Why are you making this film? And that's where those lines of dialogue actually come from. It comes from me going, okay, why am I making this film? Is because we're going to continue to fight.
Yeah.
We're continue to fight through film, cinema, dance, arts, politics, whatever avenue that we can kind of find, we're going to fight. And so that was the statement from me in terms of the importance of telling these kinds of stories, the importance of blending genres, the importance of um, uplifting Indigenous voice and Indigenous women, um, because we have so much to say and we've been basically erased
Mm,
from history. Everything's kind of very male focused or male dominated. And I think when we have Indigenous women tell stories, we're more inclusive of that voice and we understand it, and that's why, for me, like the cave scene with the women, I think that's so important to show that, they were doing that work. They were in hiding, but they were still active.
mm.
They weren't passive. They were doing something about it the best way that they could in that context. So
Oh, yeah, that scene, I love that scene um, because it feels almost otherworldly in the best of ways. It's reclaiming so much and honoring those who come before, and also empowering the people who are there. And I love that aspect about the film.
we,
Um,
it's important to note too, I think as a side note that, Angela's Shadow was shot in 13 days. We only had one or two takes with the actors, but I had a predominantly Indigenous crew,
hmm,
understood and wanted to be there, who made it happen. Because you don't make a film by yourself, you make it with your community, right? So uh I feel like all of that energy, that positive energy, having like my community and family there really helped um uplift this story, make it to what it is, today. And I just wanted to mention that. Like, I think that's really important to note as an Indigenous filmmaker. Sometimes we're making more for less.
Mm.
Still need to change within the industry that we can kind of have better access or more financing or more time. I know everybody complains there's not enough time, there's not enough money, but making a film in 13 days is it's a lot, And we won the audience award at VIFF. So it's like, okay, we did something right, but I didn't do it by myself. I did it with my family and community behind me and with me. So
I really appreciate that. I had no idea this was made in 13 days. That's incredible.
yeah,
What
that's
you and your
very
team are able to accomplish in less than 2 weeks is mind-boggling. Um, Jules, we're running out of time. I just really appreciate the chance to chat with you about this. Thank you so much for sharing the film with us, and I really do hope that everybody gets a chance to check out Angela's Shadow. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.